So good morning everybody from the gorgeous Moray Firth up in Scotland. If you haven't been here, this is my home country and I'm proud to be a Scotsman, and it's a gorgeous place. Do come up here for a holiday, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And the topic I'd like to discuss with you today is the business of Racecourse SPs very briefly. And I thank you for your time in watching this video blog, and I'll be producing more in the future for you. There was a lot of criticism leveled at Racecourse Bookmakers recently with regard to the Grand National because the over-round, so-called Bookmakers margin, was running at 160%. In this case, it was led by The Guardian. Normally, they're a fantastic paper. I thoroughly recommend some of their reports. Reporting is really excellent. But as you know, over many years, this criticism was driven by the Racing Post. The fact is, the Racing Post is sponsored by major online bookmakers, and it's bought by the punters. So of course it's basically a cheap form of journalism. You criticize the smallest bookmakers because they're not funding the paper, and you curry favor with the people that actually buy the paper. So this is what was going on, because in reality, if you look at normal races in Britain, 5, 6, 7, 8 runners, you would see typical overrounds of 108, 109, 110, 112, something like that. The Grand National, however, is a highly unusual horse race in British racing, in that there are 40 runners. We don't see that too often in British racing anymore. They've done away with large field events that everybody loves so much. Only the Grand National, the Irish Grand National, the Welsh Grand National, and a couple of races at Goodwood, Stewards Cup for example, employ these kind of runners. So it's unusual to have 40 runners, and 160 is in actual fact around about industry standard. I mean, if you were talking about greyhound racing, for example, we would be talking about 4.5% per runner. That's what greyhound racing typically runs at. And that would mean the Grand National would be running at around about 230% over round. Now that would be remarkable. But the truth is that 160% actually wasn't. And one thing to remember is that when we talk about racecourse overrounds, is that the average on-course bookmaker shoulders enormous expenses to go and do the job that they love. And it's not an easy job. For example, I'll go to Kempton. I'm a larger bookmaker than most, as people will appreciate the bets that we lay. My expenses to bet at Cheltenham will be in the region of £7,000. Now, clearly I need to recover that money, and it has to come from betting to a slightly better margin than what I would be betting to if I was sitting in my underpants at home and laying horses on Betfair and drinking coffee. You know, these expenses are necessary, as are racecourse bookmakers. I'd like for a minute for you to imagine a world without on-course bookmakers. It would look like Longchamp. Many of you go to Longchamp for the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe, and it's, well, I don't know about you, but for me it's kind of soulless because there are no racecourse bookmakers. There's no fun in the place. Racecourse bookmakers are the fun, the engine of British racing, and they should be encouraged and nurtured and protected as a species rather than cheaply criticised by journalists. And I'd like to see an end to this practice, this annual bashing. The second topic I'd like to briefly discuss with you is the issue of starting prices and where they come from. Personally, I think it's a sad day for British racing when Big Mac disappeared off our screens. He was engaging. Maybe people didn't like him, but they loved to watch him. And one of Big Mac's regular rants was about industry prices. He was dead against industry prices, and he would say so regularly. And so at that time, the major online betting firms that so many of you bet with, I wish you didn't, but the fact is that you do, they didn't have industry prices. Where did they come from? Well, they had to have industry prices when you had tracks like Meydan in Dubai, who don't have racecourse bookmakers, so then you reasonably have to have industry prices. But what's happened since then? That's the question. A few years ago, 2 years ago indeed it was, I sent a team to Kempton, and I was sitting in my office at home, and I noticed that a horse, the favourite, was 4.5 on the betting exchange, but up in the show from Turf TV it was 9-4. So I rang up my team at the track. I said, what price is this horse? And they said, we've got 100-30, and it's generally 100-30 in the ring, some 7-2, some 3-1, that kind of thing, quite normal. Look at my show up on the screen. It went 9 to 4, then very quickly it changed. It went 5 to 2, 11 to 4, and the race went off. And the SP was 100 to 30. In other words, the data was either lagging well behind the Racecourse bookmakers or completely inaccurate. So I rang up Turf TV on the Monday morning and I spoke to a very nice, engaging young fella, and I asked him where these prices were being driven. And he told me very honestly, he would be a young guy who wouldn't have known any better. He told me that the prices were in fact being driven by traders at Turf TV. They sit there and they look at a data feed from BetDAC. And then in a similar way to Racecourse bookmakers, but without the money, without laying a bet, they sit there and they watch the win prices from BetDAC, and they formulate the market for us. So Turf TV, of course, are part funded by bookmakers, or largely funded by major online bookmakers. So it's arguable that it is in the favour of large betting enterprises to have direct control over the prices that apparently appear to come from Racecourse bookmakers. But is that the case? Because if what was happening at Kempton that particular day happens every day at Kempton, and by extension at every Turf TV racetrack, then where are the prices for British racing, for the board prices and for the starting prices actually coming from? Aren't you curious? I am. Now there is a body, as you know, or may be aware, that's responsible for this kind of thing, and they are called the Starting Price Regulatory Commission. Well, surely it's their job to tell customers, consumers in this particular case, where in fact the prices are being driven. If you go on Coral in the morning, you know you're betting with Coral. But when the show prices come through, I don't know about you, but me, I always thought they were coming from the racetrack. But that may not be in fact true, or only partially true. And if it's only partially true, well, which racetracks are we not getting prices driven by the racetrack bookmakers? It's a curiosity, isn't it? Some might describe it, if this is more widespread, as a scandal, in that one should always know where it is one is buying a product from, who is driving the prices, and how those prices are driven. Isn't that fair? And the last body that should be interested in all this kind of stuff is the United Kingdom Gambling Commission. Once again, they are notably in absentia when we're talking about things like this. They're supposed to look after the consumer, ensure that betting is fair, accurate and open. And surely it's incumbent on them to busy themselves to find out where prices are coming from and to educate the general public who are betting on those prices, investing a lot of money, not millions, billions every year, as to where the prices are actually being driven. Would you consider it fair if a trader sitting in a London office not laying a shilling was in fact determining the prices for you arbitrarily? Have a great weekend. Enjoy Sandown. The Bet365 Gold Cup is the feature race at Sandown, and we look forward to seeing you there. And for those of you that bet with me, have an excellent weekend and do well. All the best.